All right, so welcome to another deep dive.
Always exciting.
Today, we're diving into a pretty heavy situation that recently unfolded at Anna University in Chennai, India.
Oh, yeah.
We've got a whole bunch of news articles all covering the same event. And yeah, the details are, pretty intense.
Definitely.
We're looking at a sexual assault case that happened right there on campus. And it's bringing up all sorts of questions about safety and security, the accused person's history,
Right.
and even some political angles we need to consider.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? It's like this one event kind of connects to these much bigger issues.
For sure. Like, we're seeing those concerns about women's safety, obviously.
Yeah.
But then there's how the justice system, how it handles people who've maybe committed crimes before, repeat offenders.
Exactly.
And even how the media decides to frame these kinds of stories. It's a lot.
Absolutely. It's a lot to unpack.
Okay, so first things first. Let's try to figure out what exactly happened. Most of the articles agree on the basics. It was December 23rd, pretty late, around 8 p.m., when a second-year engineering student was assaulted on the Anna University campus.
Right.
But here's where things get a little murky. Some articles say she was with a male friend at the time of the attack, while others say she was alone.
Huh. That's a pretty big difference, right? Like, if you're just reading these news reports, trying to piece things together,
Yeah.
that one detail could totally change how you see the whole situation.
Exactly. It makes you think, like, even small differences in the reporting can really influence how people interpret what happened.
Absolutely.
Okay, so moving on to the accused. The articles all name him as Gnanasekaran, a 37-year-old man who, he runs a biryani stall near the university.
Okay.
And here's where things start to get, pretty troubling.
Yeah.
The articles paint him as someone with a pretty extensive criminal record. Yeah, we're talking over 15 cases of theft and robbery against him. And get this, one article even mentions a previous arrest for sexual assault.
Wow.
Possibly even on the same campus back in 2011.
That's disturbing.
Yeah. And there's one more detail that really jumped out at me. It was in the Times of India article. They claim that Gnanasekaran actually threatened the victim, told her he had filmed her, and would, blast it all over the internet, ruin her reputation if she didn't do what he wanted.
Oh, wow. If that's true, that adds like a whole other dimension to this.
It does.
It suggests he planned this, like it wasn't just a spur of the moment thing. It was calculated.
Yeah.
Trying to control her, silence her, just awful.
Yeah, it's truly terrible. So now, obviously, in the aftermath of all this, a lot of the focus has shifted to the university's response and, the bigger picture of security on campus.
Right.
And what's interesting is, even though Anna University has all this tech like CCTV cameras and facial recognition system, it still seems like, there are some serious security gaps.
Yeah, you would think with all that, they'd have it covered.
Right. One article even mentioned that 70% of students already felt unsafe on campus before this whole thing even happened.
Oh, really?
It's wild. So it really begs the question, how could someone like Gnanasekaran with this alleged history, how could he even get onto campus and do something like this?
Exactly. Like, what's the point of all that security if it doesn't actually make people feel safe?
Right. And so the university, of course, they've issued statements saying, they have adequate security, but are planning to beef things up even more.
Of course.
They're also talking about how the Internal Complaints Committee and the POSH cell, which stands for Prevention of Sexual Harassment, they're both involved now.
Okay.
And then on a national level, the National Commission for Women has taken what's called suo motu cognizance, which basically means they're stepping in, demanding action and investigation, even without a formal complaint being filed.
Interesting. So it's kind of being taken seriously on multiple levels then.
Yeah, it seems that way. But here's where things get a little, political.
Uh-oh.
A BJP leader, Anamalai, he's come out publicly and said that Gnanasekaran, the accused, is actually a DMK functionary.
Whoa.
He's even shared pictures of Gnanasekaran with some DMK leaders as proof.
All right.
But naturally, the DMK is denying any connection to him.
Of course.
So yeah, this political angle definitely throws another wrench into the whole thing. It makes you wonder how these accusations and the denials, how they might influence the investigation, how the public sees the whole case.
Absolutely. You have to wonder if this will turn into a political battle instead of a focus on justice.
Yeah, it's definitely a situation we're going to keep watching closely.
It's crazy how one event, as awful as it is, can suddenly shine a light on these much bigger issues in society.
Yeah, totally. It's like this incident at Anna University. It's almost like it cracked open this door and we're suddenly seeing this huge problem that was kind of always there.
Exactly.
Like one article, it pointed out the statistic, and it's actually really alarming, that 1 in 3 women in India experience some form of sexual violence during their lives.
Right.
It's heavy stuff. In this case, it's like a harsh reminder that, honestly, we're just not doing enough to protect women.
No, we're not. And the articles, they touch on different parts of this problem, right? We're talking about better security on campuses, for sure. But they also go deeper into those societal issues.
Yeah.
Like gender inequality, that culture of not speaking up about sexual violence, and the fact that there aren't really strong consequences for people who commit these acts.
It's disheartening to think that what happened to this young woman, it's not an isolated incident.
Right.
One article even talked about how stuff like this, it impacts the other students too, you know?
Yeah.
It creates this atmosphere of fear and anxiety, making it hard to concentrate on their studies and just like feel safe in a place that should be all about learning.
Yeah. That's so important. It's not just about the direct victims of these crimes. It's that ripple effect that goes through the entire community.
Absolutely.
Creates this sense of fear and distrust that's hard to shake.
And the articles also talked about needing more support systems for survivors.
Right.
Like one article focused on having trained counselors on campus, people who can actually help and guide the students who have gone through something traumatic.
Oh, yeah. Those resources are essential. It's not enough to just investigate and prosecute these crimes.
No.
We need to make sure that the survivors have what they need to heal and move forward.
For sure. And speaking of investigations and prosecutions, there was this detail in one of the articles that it really caught my eye.
What was that?
So apparently the FIR, that's the first information report that gets filed with the police, it accidentally included the victim's identity.
Oh, no.
They're blaming it on some technical glitch, but still.
That's a huge mistake. Like, protecting the victim's identity in these cases is super important.
Yeah.
Especially with all the social stigma they often face. This just raises all these questions about how secure their data is and if the authorities are even equipped to handle this sensitive information properly.
It's a mess. And reading about that glitch, I just kept thinking about the victim,
Yeah.
Like, on top of the assault, now she has to deal with this.
Awful. It's like a double violation.
It is. And this is where that political angle we talked about earlier, it just gets even more complicated.
Right.
The articles, they have different takes on how these accusations from the BJP against the DMK, how that might impact the investigation. Some suggest that it could lead to political pressure, maybe even interference.
Yeah, I could see that.
But then others argue that maybe it'll actually bring more attention to the case, make the process more accountable.
I guess we'll see. It's a tough one to predict how it'll all play out.
It is. But one thing's for sure, this whole case has become a political football, and that's going to have some serious consequences for how it's handled and how the public sees it.
You're absolutely right. It takes the focus away from what really matters, justice for the victim.
We've gone through a lot in this deep dive, huh?
Yeah, for sure.
It's easy to get stuck on all the specifics of this case, but I think what's really important is to kind of zoom out a bit, Think about what this all means, the bigger picture.
I totally agree. We looked at the assault, the accused, the university's reaction, even the politics of it all.
Yeah.
But the big question is, where do we go from here?
Exactly. Like, what can we learn from all of this to actually prevent this kind of thing from happening again?
Right. What are the takeaways?
That's the key, right?
Yeah.
For me, one of the biggest things that stood out is that we can't just rely on one solution to start violence against women. It's not as simple as more security or stricter laws.
I see what you mean.
It's got to be a deeper change in attitudes and behaviors and, just how we think about these issues.
You're right. It's got to be more fundamental. And one of the articles actually talked about this, about bystander intervention training.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
It was saying that if people are taught how to recognize dangerous situations and how to safely step in,
Yeah.
that could be a really powerful way to stop violence before it happens.
That's such a good point. We tend to think it's all on the police or security guards to prevent these things, but really it's about all of us, creating a culture where anyone feels like they can speak up if they see something wrong.
Exactly. It's like collective responsibility, right? You build a community where that kind of behavior just isn't acceptable. Another article emphasized how important good sex education is.
Right.
Not just the biology, but also about consent, healthy relationships, respecting each other.
Totally agree. These conversations need to start early,
Yeah.
Give young people the knowledge and tools to have safe and respectful relationships.
Absolutely. But it's not just about education, is it? There's also the whole issue of holding the people who commit these crimes accountable.
Yeah, making sure the justice system actually works to deter them from doing it again.
Right. And if those allegations about Gnanasekaran's previous arrest for sexual assault are true, that really makes you question how we handle repeat offenders.
It does. Like, does the punishment actually fit the crime? One article suggested maybe we need different approaches to sentencing.
Interesting.
Focusing more on rehabilitation, addressing the root causes of the behavior.
Instead of just locking them up and hoping for the best.
Exactly, because clearly that's not always working. And while we're talking about accountability, we can't forget about the media's role in all of this.
Oh, yeah.
How they choose to report on these stories shapes how the public sees them and ultimately how justice is served.
Definitely. The narrative they create matters.
You know, reading through these articles, I was struck by how easy it is for the focus to shift away from the victim.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
It becomes about the perpetrator, the university, the politics. Almost as if the victim's experience becomes like a side note.
It's like her trauma gets lost in the noise of everything else.
Exactly. And I think that points to a bigger need for media literacy for all of us to be more critical thinkers, you know?
Absolutely. We got to be aware of those biases, those agendas that might be shaping the information we're taking in, and make a conscious effort to keep the victim's experience at the center of our understanding.
Couldn't have said it better myself. This deep dive, it's given us a lot to think about, but it's really just the beginning.
It is.
It's up to each of us to stay informed, stay engaged, and keep asking those tough questions about how we can create a world that's safer for everyone.
You're so right. As horrible as this case is, it could be the thing that sparks real change. But that change needs us to keep talking, to think critically, and to hold ourselves and those in power accountable.
Couldn't agree more. So thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Hopefully it's given you something to ponder, maybe even inspired you to take action in your own way.
I hope so too.
Remember, every voice matters. Even small actions can help create a more just world for everyone.